I'm an American standing in Moscow, Russia. Behind me is the Kievsky railway station in the center of Moscow, named after the capital of the Ukraine. About a year ago, I went with some of my colleagues out of that station to the border area to see the effect the conflict is having on the people that live in between Russia and the Ukraine. Together, we met for the first time a Canadian who is also ex-military, from the perspective of Westerners who all live in Russia. I am the Expat American.
I don't understand that question, but strategy is definitely part of it, of course.
It's hard to understand how long are we going to have to endure this.
And I just thought, I guess a person could say that in history, there was a time when the United States was young and lots of Westerners or like-minded people were flocking to the US because their older countries were a bit rigid and perhaps too controlling, and they wanted, an opportunity to, do other things, right? And maybe we're in a situation now where the Western countries have gotten kind of crazy and become kind of strict, and Russia is perhaps a place that is for traditional family values. Well, I know it is a place where a person, could feel freer and may want to come. What do you guys think?
For me, I think I can relate to a lot of what Stan is saying. Kind of negative atmosphere is permeating the entire planet, in my opinion. Like, it's not just here. Life is hard in Canada financially right now. Life is very confusing geopolitically. And I think that is part of a huge global psychological operation that's underway right now, because it's very difficult right now to make heads or tails of what's actually happening. You can't always trust your sources. You can't always keep up with the exponential function of technology that's changing. It's kind of demoralizing people. I think technology is demoralizing people in many respects, whether you have too much of it or not enough of it, right? Like, it's kind of all over the map right now. And it's hard to understand exactly like how Stan was saying about restrictions and like, what is the plan there? Because I understand that sometimes we go through restrictions because it's geolocating. Perhaps weaponries are using geolocation methods to find targets and that sort of thing. And if that's the case, then it's more understandable. I think the messaging is probably difficult for a foreigner to always stay abreast as to why things are being blocked, or, you kind of figure out that the internet's on at a certain time, especially on these border regions. We're getting in and out of connectivity, especially if you're on just a data plan rather than your Wi-Fi. And if it's for operational reasons, because the adversaries are using the data links to, focus in on populations and stuff, then it's understandable. I'm very concerned with how many countries are now fully researching how to make, automated battlefields without humans in them. And that's a world that is, probably not one that is going to be that interesting to live in, and, psychologically difficult, because, we got now AI that's sort of like pushing into the Internet of Things aggressively, and that is got a very adverse effect. I think it's going to have it's uncontrolled. It's kind of like not understandable as to how perverse it's going to get, how influential it'll get politically, as well as just from a social standpoint.
Because you have military experience, you live on the border. I know you research this a lot. Tell us, we're 4 years in. What is the general status of the Russia-Ukraine conflict right now?
I think it's a laboratory of technology. It's a high-tech laboratory of technology going on. It's kind of a new technological warfare, Cold War. It's not a Cold War; it's a technological war right now that's going on. And like I've heard of lots of companies that are helping Ukraine, and Russia's getting that technology as well and using it. Both sides are kind of inching along, and fumbling along, and there's a lot of interest in countries getting up to speed on this kind of warfare. You have the legacy kind of systems of warfare that you could see they're very clumsy now, whether it's the United States deploying battleship carrier groups out into the Indian Ocean and close to the Middle East, and these systems are just not that effective anymore, and they're actually big targets. And Um, you know, we do still live in the unipolar world from a control mechanism on finances and information. That's still holding its ground. It's losing its edge, I find. But as it affects the war in Ukraine, I mean, let's be honest, Ukraine has done a fantastic job right from the beginning of this conflict in propaganda. It has always outshined Russia's propaganda, right? And it didn't, and it's open and it's encouraged in the world versus everything that Russia does is going to be highly restricted, sanctioned, locked, and as much information doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. It's not allowed to be viewed in the West. And at this point, I almost see the world, like especially the Western world, like you don't want to know what's going on, then that's on you. But don't be surprised when the vacuum of the lies come crashing in on you. And fundamentally, it is difficult to live through attrition warfare, which is going on in Ukraine. But the bottom line is who has the greater advantage? It still lies with Russia militarily. It still lies with the ability to have more, especially long-range artillery, air dominance, where you can drop the FAB bombs on command centers and logistical nodes. I mean, Russia still has the advantage, and you can definitely hear the narrative coming up. Putin, he's like, as it relates to Germany and other European countries, don't think you're going to be treated like we're treating Ukraine, because Ukraine is surgery versus, any other operation outside of Ukraine will be way more aggressive, and they won't worry about, I guess, casualties in terms of collateral damages to infrastructure as much. So, I mean, I don't anticipate that this is going to end anytime soon. I think you're still in attrition warfare. I think it's still a grind to try and reduce the fighting capability of Ukraine. And I would hope that, because warfare is politics by other means, I hope that this can get back into the political arena, because that's where you can have disagreements with a lot less damage, right? And you can maybe compromise and live with certain realities. And it's very clear to me that Ukraine is not going to concede territory, not going to concede Crimea from a geopolitical standpoint in the international alliances that they've formed. And so, to me, unless the Ukrainian population starts to really turn in on itself and says, we're tired of bleeding and dying for the Europeans and for the Americans and for the other foreign powers that are trying to strategically defeat Russia, then there'll be some political change. And until that happens, we're going to be having more scary technological advances that come about on the battlefield, and experience those, firsthand. Whether it be a couple of them that really concern me is the ability to put on a microchip into a rocket, and it no longer needs GPS coordinated coordinates. It'll fly by AI. It'll do its own reckoning over the territory as it's flying, and understand and pick its own targets. And it's the Terminator movie coming alive, and it's frightening, and that's rockets. And rockets are, like, I've experienced it here now. Rockets are way more terrifying than drones. But drones on the border region, especially the border towns, they're wreaking havoc on civilians. They're wreaking havoc because there's a lot of collateral damage. I've been coming to Russia since 2009. And from Canada, it's a very different perspective than it is from the United States, because my understanding, if you're from the United States, you get 3-year visas going back for some time. But for Canadians, it was never easy to come to Russia. It was, I think, maximum 90 days you could get for visas. And I had accumulated about 15 visas coming to Russia from going back 2009 to 2015-ish, right? So I'd been here about 14 times on visas for numerous reasons, all family usually related. And so when I decided to finally come, the 6-month thing was still a thing, and that's the best you could do. But at the time, they suddenly came up with a family, because of the emergency of the SMO, there was a declaration to make a family visa for 12 months. So my first visa to come here was on a 12-month family visa, okay? And of course, that year expired quickly. and my passport. Nobody was really ready 100% for that conflict to shape the world like it was going to with the sanctions. So I had to return to Canada to renew my passport. And you go there thinking I checked off all the check marks to get this done. Well, I flew all the way back to Canada, got my new passport, and I couldn't come back to Russia. And when I found that out, I was already back in Istanbul when I was denied to come back on the flight. I was like, oh my God, I have to get a new visa. So I had to scramble, reroute back to Toronto and wait at the consulate there to get my visa reissued. So that got reissued in my new passport, and I made sure I got a 10-year passport that goes for a long, long time. So when I came, I presented myself obviously here, registering on doing all the legal registration you have to do. And so I was again on a 12-month visa. So obviously you get to learn what you have to get going on doing. And some of it is learning the language, the law, the history, and working on all those mechanisms, especially the language. And you'll have to write a test and go to a language center. So I actually did the lowest level of entry on that and barely passed, and got through, and I applied for my 3-year temporary residency and got that. Okay, so that's what I'm on right now. I'm not on the special consideration visas and that. And I've been actually working very hard to learn the language daily, and the history. And I don't think I would have a problem passing all that kind of stuff now almost. I think I probably would pass the language test. I would probably stumble along through it, and but the history and the law stuff, I don't think that would be that difficult. I've been studying all that stuff quite diligently. And one of the big challenges, like I think I shared with you guys, is my Canadian license was such a pain in the, paying to renew every year and get the pictures and, and get that sent, or, and they want a new photo, and there's all kinds of barriers. So I studied hard in Russian language, and I studied for like 6 months to do the test, and I enrolled in a driving school, and I got my Russian driver's license finally. But I mean, for somebody, this is a full-time job, trying to do these things. And then my frustration is now like, okay, there's the shared values kind of visa, which I wasn't on. I was on a family, right? And I earned it by learning the language and doing the history, like doing all the, what you have to do, including all the medical and documents. And I'm in a Bryansk region, which is, it's not common for people from the West to immigrate here. And a little point I want to mention to Stan about some of the challenges of the immigration that and it's the nature of Russia. It's that double-headed eagle, like from the East and from the West, right? Like it's completely, all those people dealing with immigration from the East, it's a different kind of basket of challenges for probably the immigration centers to deal with than it is from the Western intake, right? It's always usually about the language, and that was fundamentally the biggest challenge is, you have to learn Russian language and assimilate to get into Russia. So anyways, now there's this new thing that's, popping up where you have to go and serve in the SMO if you're interested in getting permanent residency or citizenship, and there's no mention of language. But I mean, my issue with that is it's not so much an issue. I mean, you're 55, you're going to go on the front line, you're going to go serve in an army that you don't particularly would be responding well to orders that are perhaps being given in a panic situation. And how are you going to respond? You're going to probably hurt the people beside you more than help them at that point. You know what I mean? It'd be more of a liability than it would be an asset. If you don't understand the language, and, certainly I understand lots, but I mean, there's just too much opportunity to be fumbling out there and not being helpful, So I don't get that aspect of the immigration thing. And I understand, like, for people who are Russian, been here, they should serve, right? And serve the country to earn their citizenship and all that. And I'm not sure. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't know that it's that helpful to recruit foreigners into the Russian army who don't speak the language and may or may not even be physically fit to do it. It's not an easy job to be in the army. I was in the army, and I was physically a machine back in the day, but I'm not anymore. I could walk through a wall when I was younger. Like, I do that anymore. So that's kind of where I'm at, and understanding the immigration challenges is really, there is a lot of misinformation. There is a lot of maybe opportunistic people taking advantage of it. I don't know. But I'm in a border region, and I can tell you the intake of going for your medical and making sure you're not a narco person, and you do your drug tests and your, all the testing and the blood and all that kind of stuff. It was in buildings that were just like, nobody would be able to navigate through that system unless you were, I had my family to help me. But to be doing it alone would be impossible. Like when you talk about the Middle East and what's currently going on in Iran, that was definitely one of the big propaganda points, was they had to neuter any chances of Iran getting nuclear weapons. But we've had many, shows saying, it's kind of debunking that whole theory of them requiring to attack Iran so that they don't have nuclear weapons. And of course, we're not sworn into the cosmic top secret levels of understanding what nations know about other nations and stuff. But through multiple sources and open sources, you kind of get a feel for different forces that are behind all these nuclear technologies in the different countries. And one country certainly stands out. North Korea has never been threatened so easily because they have nuclear weapons, right? And it's kind of never been attacked because of that. So, I've listened to quite a few pundits, professionals, academics on the topic. And, when it comes to nuclear weapons, I think the first country now that uses nuclear weapons, they're going to be such a pariah that the entire planet will just come crashing down on them. Whoever, opens up that genie is going to be just looked upon as such a vile place. And I don't think there'd be immediate retaliations in a nuclear war right away, because there would be that whole, atmosphere of politics that discuss who did it and how. Now, as it relates to nuclear weapons, I've come across some researched information recently. And to me, one of the big problems with nuclear weapons is, when it's done in secret and it's not open, to inspections and international UN kind of charters, it becomes problematic. And I think that's where the imbalance lies right now in the world, is you have countries like Israel who have the undeclared nuclear weapons, and they're not being held accountable at the international level to come clean on what they actually have and what the purpose of it is for. And then you have nations like Iran who, may have plans to develop them in secret, but they're also openly declaring that they were never going to create a nuclear weapon. The thing is,
and you have the situation where Gaddafi turned over his nuclear weapons, right? And that didn't end well for him.
And there's multiple precedents that if you don't have nuclear weapons, you're going to be attacked by that full spectrum warfare mechanism that the United States and the Western world has, where it incorporates everything coming at you: CIA, non-government organizations, internet. Everything is weaponized against your state. If you're not playing their political tune, if you're not following their script, they're coming against you. And if you have highly nationalized industries like that are supporting the healthcare system or providing social services to families and stuff like that, and that doesn't mesh with the capitalistic imperialistic model, that leadership becomes a target. And I wish powers and principalities would be able to maneuver the world in a little more peaceful way, and it's absurd. We've moved into a dimension of absurdity, especially the United States, with regards to its diplomatic mechanisms they're failed. And they're I think it's on purpose at this point. I'm of the opinion that it's all WWF wrestling, World Wrestling Federation masquerade to trick people into not seeing the big picture, which is, unfortunately, the Middle East is, it's a project, and it's a project that's been, deeply planned for a long time. And, when you see Trump just throwing social media stuff that, would obviously upset everybody, it's done on purpose. It's meant to create a narrative that distracts everybody from what's the point. And the point is, there's a greater Israel project at work. You deep dive into that, and you understand that, the donors in Israel that continue to influence American politics. It's deep, it's technological, it's Oracle, it's like richest man on the planet, Larry Ellison, who's, he's groomed people in politics in the United States like Marco Rubio. These guys were selected a long time ago to play out this scenario right now, a long time ago. And the amount of influence that a company like Oracle has in a place like Israel, it's funding, it provides donations to the IDF, it funds its IT infrastructure, it's so encompassing now, this technology warfare, which is like a new Cold War, right? And and it's very scary. And if you're in their way, well, you become a Lebanon, you become an Iran, you become Russia, and heaven forbid there's competition on the planet.